This is the Hero's Quest podcast, and I am your host and life coach, Tim. So I want to take you back to when I was 14 years old. My father had just recently went back to prison, and I got word that he hid a gun underneath the house. And so I was the only one in the household who was small and brave enough to go underneath the house in that small crawl space. And so when nobody was home, that's what I did. I went down there and I retrieved that gun that day. Not soon after, I found myself at the mom and pop's liquor store 2 blocks up the street. And it's dark and I'm sitting in a bush and I'm thinking about robbing the place. And I'm trying to build up enough courage on the inside to point a gun at somebody and threaten to take their life. And so as I'm in this inner dialogue and this struggle, I couldn't get up enough courage to do it. And so I left. And then as I'm walking home, I walked by this ATM and this Versateller, and I see this old lady getting money. And immediately my brain starts going through the same dialogue. You should go point the gun at her and take her money. And so I'm having this inner dialogue of, you're a punk if you don't go do it. And then the other side of me is, you're a punk if you do something like that. And luckily for me, I talked myself out of it once again. And I ended up breaking into a printer store and stealing the money out of 2 registers and went home. You see, at that point, at 14 years old, I was already addicted to methamphetamines. And at that time, I was only doing about $30 a day, which is pretty low. But for a 14-year-old, trying to come up with $30 a day was pretty difficult. And you might be asking yourself this question, what's wrong with this kid? And so I want to take you to another really low moment where I'm holding on to this stop sign. And I had mentally convinced myself that if I let go, that the gravitational pull was going to suck me away from the earth. At 14 years old, my mind is so far gone that I'm under illusions and imagining scenarios that could never take place. One of the darkest moments for me was I'm sitting alone in my room and feeling empty and helpless and just sick of life, that I decided to grab a bottle of those sleep aids. I believe there was 30 of them in there. And I set it there on the counter and I began to write on the mirror my suicide note. And then as I began to cry, I took all those pills and I swallowed them. And I'm telling you, I had the worst anxiety and the worst experience of my life before I passed out and then woke up still alive. One thing I do remember about that morning is that I could barely open my mouth. It was like everything inside of my mouth was glued shut. But the most thing that hits me about that morning was feeling insignificant, worthless, and lost. In fact, I felt so insignificant that I thought that nobody even cared or even noticed. I remember leaving that note up on my mirror, and I really don't ever remember taking it off. It was always present there. But it always gave me a reminder of how insignificant and worthless my life was. And so to take you back even farther, the reason I got to this point, you see, had multiple adverse childhood experiences to the point where all of us kids were taken away at 10 years old and given to other members of the family. There was drugs and there was prostitution. There was murders on in our house. All these things took place, and then the government decided to take us away. And so I have a couple positive years with my grandmother, who raised me from 10 to 13. And she's taking me to church, and I'm going to Christian school, and she's doing everything she can to save me, in a sense, and try to reverse the trauma that I experienced. And at 13 years old, I tried to wake her up, and she wouldn't wake up. And it didn't take long for me to discover that she was no longer breathing, and her skin wasn't the same color. And at that moment, I felt like everything that I loved, anything that was ever good in my life, was gone. And that began the experience of trying to mask and to hide all that with substances. Soon after the suicide attempt, I ran away, and I moved in with a female drug dealer who was in her 30s. And we began to sell drugs together. Somewhere about 15 years old, everything that I experienced came crushing down on me. And it came soon after an overdose, where my eyes became tunnel and my ears could hear nothing but my heartbeat, and my heart was racing, and things were going white, and I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, "Fuck you, God. I don't care what the fuck you do to me." After that experience, I could never do drugs the same. And then I began to contemplate my whole life. And it became a major crisis, and I can't pinpoint it exactly, but it came to the point with, are you going to take responsibility of your life? Or are you going to end up dead or in jail? And one of those days, that crisis came so strong that I decided that I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. And that happened around the age of 16 years old. And so why this podcast, you ask? Maybe you have experienced major childhood trauma. Maybe you have been through addiction. Maybe you have been through pain. And you need somebody who has been there, that knows what they're talking about. I'm telling you that I am that person. And then that's why you want to stay tuned each week, because I'm going to bring you real scenarios of how I begin to put the victim to bed, and I begin to wake the hero up instead. And so I want to leave you with these words. Be your own hero today. That is, I will be honorable. I will be empowered. I will be resilient. And I will take ownership for my life. Under the link, you will find a website that'll take you to the blueprint for success. I'm offering this to you for free. Check it out. And remember, wake the hero. Join us at wakethehero.com.
Hold up.